A honeybee lifts off from the lavender, crosses the quiet garden, and stops in the air inches from a human face. It does not strike. It does not dive. It hangs there, vibrating in place, its wings blurring into a glassy shimmer, its tiny body making constant adjustments against the breeze. The person stays still. The bee drifts left. The person turns slightly. The bee adjusts again. A moment later, it leaves. Then it comes back. Not to the sleeve, not to the bright flower printed on a shirt, not to the jar of honey on the table. It returns to the same patch of air near the same face, as if that face has become a point on its map. This is where the story usually gets exaggerated. It is tempting to say the bee knows the person. It is tempting to imagine a tiny mind looking out through compound eyes and thinking, "There you are." But the truth is stranger, because it is not magic. A honeybee has a brain smaller than a sesame seed. It is packed into a head so small it could rest on the edge of a fingernail. And yet, under the right conditions, that brain can learn visual patterns complicated enough to resemble human faces. It can be trained to choose one face-like image over another. It can remember that choice. And when scientists rearrange the parts of the face, the bee's performance can fall apart. That detail matters, because it suggests the bee is not just reacting to one random dark spot, one bright patch, or one simple cue. It is doing something more organized. It is using the arrangement of features. For most of human history, insects have been easy to underestimate. They are small. They move quickly. Their behavior can look automatic, as if each bee is only a bundle of reflexes responding to smell, color, heat, and motion. A flower appears, and the bee lands. A shadow passes, and the bee escapes. Nectar is found, and the bee feeds. Simple cause, simple effect. But honeybees keep breaking that picture. They navigate across landscapes. They remember profitable flowers. They learn colors, odors, shapes, and locations. They communicate food sites to nestmates. They return to places that worked before and ignore places that did not. Their lives depend on extracting meaning from a world overflowing with patterns. So when a bee appears to notice a face, the question is not whether it has become a tiny human. The question is how a nervous system so small can do anything like this at all. The answer begins with a reframe. Honeybees are not recognizing faces the way people recognize friends, family, or strangers on a crowded street. They do not need a human story attached to a human face. They are not reading emotion in the eyes or remembering a name. What they can do is learn. A pattern appears. A reward follows. The bee's brain changes. Later, when similar patterns appear again, the bee can make a choice. That choice is the doorway. Because if a honeybee can learn a human face-like pattern, then face recognition is not only a human achievement, it is also a test case, a way of revealing the power hidden inside compact brains. The bee is not solving the problem with human-like thought. It is solving it with a different kind of intelligence, efficient, compressed, tuned by evolution, for flowers, flight, navigation, and survival. The garden becomes quiet again. The bee circles once near the person's cheek, catches the light, and turns back toward the blooms. It may not know who that person is, but it may know that this pattern is not random. In the lab, the mystery becomes a choice. A honeybee flies into a small testing arena where two flat images wait like doors. On one side, there is a human face. On the other, another face, similar in brightness, similar in size, but different in the arrangement of eyes, nose, and mouth. The bee does not arrive with any natural reason to care about either one. Human faces are not flowers. They do not offer nectar. They are not landmarks bees evolved to read. So scientists give the pattern meaning. In a widely cited experiment from 2005, Adrian Dyer and colleagues trained honeybees with sugar solution. One face image became the rewarding image. The bee landed there, tasted sugar, and learned. Again and again, the same kind of choice appeared. This pattern pays, that one does not. Later, when the reward was removed, the bee still tended to choose the trained face more often than unfamiliar faces. That is the first important line to draw. The bee was not born knowing a human face. It was not recognizing a person in the human sense. It was learning a complex visual pattern because that pattern had been linked to reward. Then came the sharper clue. When the features of the face were rearranged, performance declined. Move the parts, disturb the structure, and the learned pattern becomes harder for the bee to use. That means the bee was not simply memorizing a single black dot, a patch of brightness, or one crude mark. It was sensitive to configuration, the relationship between parts. For an animal with compound eyes, that is not a small thing. A honeybee does not see a face the way a person does. Its eyes are built from thousands of tiny units called ommatidia, each sampling a small part of the world. Its vision is lower in detail than human vision. A crisp portrait to us is a rougher arrangement of contrasts to a bee. It also sees color differently, with sensitivity to ultraviolet, blue, and green, but not red the way humans experience it. The bee's world is not a dimmer version of ours. It is an alien version. Edges matter. Motion matters. Contrast matters. Polarized light matters. Color patterns matter. Spatial layout matters. A flower is not just a pretty object. It is a signal system, marked with colors and shapes that can guide a bee toward nectar. Some petals carry ultraviolet patterns invisible to human eyes, like landing instructions written in another language. So when a bee learns a face-like image, it is not seeing a familiar human expression. It is extracting structure from a visual field. Dark region above lighter region. Paired features. Centered features. Distances between parts. A whole arrangement that can be compared against another arrangement. Different does not mean primitive. Honeybees can learn shapes, symmetry, orientation, and spatial relationships. They can solve visual discrimination tasks using multiple cues at once. Under some conditions, they can transfer what they learned from one pattern to another, similar pattern. This is the quiet engine beneath the surprise. Not a little person inside the bee, but a nervous system able to sort the world by useful relationships. And then the scale of it lands. A honeybee brain contains about 960,000 neurons, fewer than 1 million. A human brain contains roughly 86 billion. The comparison is almost absurd. A vast city of cells beside a speck of living circuitry. Yet inside that speck are specialized regions, including the mushroom bodies, deeply involved in learning, memory, sensory integration, and navigation. In social insects like bees, ants, and wasps, these mushroom bodies are especially important. They help turn experience into future action. They help a forager remember what worked, where it worked, and what signals predicted reward. The face experiment matters because it exposes this machinery in an unexpected place. Bees did not evolve for portraits. They evolved for flowers, flight paths, nest entrances, landmarks, scents, colors, and changing landscapes. A foraging honeybee may visit hundreds of blossoms. It must learn which ones are worth the effort, which colors and shapes predict nectar, which routes lead home, and which places should be revisited when the sun shifts and the day changes. A flower can be a puzzle of color, symmetry, scent, timing, and reward. A landscape can be a maze of edges, shadows, and landmarks. To survive, the bee must keep useful patterns and discard useless noise. That is why a human face-like image can become meaningful in an experiment. It borrows a system built for something else. Reward strengthens the association. Repetition makes the memory more durable. In bees, learning has been studied through free-flying visual tasks and through the proboscis extension reflex, where an odor paired with sugar causes the bee to extend its tongue-like proboscis in anticipation. With enough training, some memories can last for days. The brain changes at the level of circuits and synapses, turning a brief experience into stored information. So the accurate claim is not that honeybees naturally understand human identity. The accurate claim is more precise and more remarkable. A honeybee can learn and remember human face-like visual patterns when those patterns are linked to reward. It can use relationships among features, not just isolated cues. It can do this with a brain smaller than a sesame seed, using general learning machinery shaped by a life among flowers. The bee is not thinking like us. It is proving that thinking was never only ours. The bee returns to the garden, and the same moment now means something different. It hovers near the person's face, suspended in a trembling pocket of air. But the mystery has changed shape. It no longer has to be a fairy tale. It no longer has to be a warning. It does not have to mean the bee is angry, or affectionate, or secretly naming the person in some miniature inner language. It may simply be attending. That word matters. Attention does not have to look human to be real. A honeybee's attention is built for another world, a world of moving air, ultraviolet markings, flower shapes, sun angles, polarized light, scent trails, and landmarks that shift as the body flies past them. It is attention made for speed and survival, for finding nectar and getting home, for deciding quickly which signal is worth following and which one is noise. A human face is not the natural center of that world, but under the right conditions, a face-like pattern can be pulled into the bee's system of meaning. If the pattern predicts sugar, the bee can learn it. If the parts are arranged in a stable way, the bee can compare it. If the experience is repeated, the bee can remember it. And if the pattern appears again, the bee can choose. That is the real shift. At first, a bee near a face feels random. A small insect wanders too close, and the human mind fills the gap with fear or coincidence. Maybe it smelled something sweet. Maybe it noticed movement. Maybe it was confused. And sometimes those explanations may be enough. Bees do rely on odor. They do respond to motion. They do follow color and contrast and location. But they are not only reflexes stitched together. They are learners. A forager that leaves the hive enters a world too complicated for simple automatic behavior. The best flowers change. Some blooms run dry. Some colors predict reward in one place and not another. A useful route in the morning may look different in afternoon light. The bee must update. It must remember. It must compare present signals with past experience. That is why the face experiment is so powerful. It takes a skill built for flowers and landscapes, then points it at something completely outside the bee's evolutionary script. The result is not human face recognition in miniature. It is something more alien and, in its own way, more revealing. The bee does not need to know what a person is to distinguish one organized pattern from another. It does not need a human-sized brain to store a useful association. It does not need to think like a person to solve a problem that people assumed only larger minds could solve. This is where the old ladder of intelligence begins to fail. Intelligence is often imagined as a single staircase, with simple creatures on the lower steps and humans near the top. But the honeybee suggests a different picture. Not one ladder, but many solutions, each shaped by the pressures of a particular life. A bee's mind is not a smaller version of a human mind. It is a flying, foraging, navigating system, compressed into less than 1 million neurons. It is built to turn patterns into decisions. It is built to remember what matters. It is built to find order in a world that is constantly moving. So the next time a honeybee pauses in front of a face, the moment can stay precise. It is not proof that the bee knows a name. It is not proof that it feels recognition the way a person does. But it is also not nothing. Inside that tiny head is a compact engine of learning, one that can take fragments of light, contrast, position, and reward, and turn them into memory. It can carry the history of a flower patch. It can hold the location of home. It can link a visual pattern with sweetness and return to that pattern later. The bee drifts closer, then farther away. Its body tilts in the air. Its compound eyes gather a version of the world no human will ever see. For a second, two forms of attention meet. One huge and self-aware, one small and ancient, both making sense of patterns. Then the bee turns back toward the flowers. Not random, not magic. A different kind of mind, passing through the light.